Hey, hi peeps, it's Tess back in the old squat box once again, and this is a quick, I suppose, atheist sort of video, you know. The following clip is from Intelligence Squared debate. I think it was, does science refute God, or does science refute religion, something like that, you know. But this next clip is the best description of how human beings, from a very early stage in our evolution, developed the need, or developed the cognitive reasonings for spirits and gods and stuff, you know. It really does make a lot of sense that is why anywhere you go in the world, whatever human beings you come across, whatever societies and small tribes, they've all developed some form of gods or spirits which control the world but are invisible. It's a brilliant description of how we evolved into having the necessity for humanising natural phenomena around about us into being created by an entity. But there's also a bit at the end of the clip as well where he mentions that when we evolved, probably about 7,000 years ago, started to change our societies from hunter-gatherers into small communities, staying in the same place. And because these communities became larger, we then had to develop some further form of control and behaviour other than shunning or expunging from the group, or beating, although that didn't stop either. But because punishment became part of laws which were made by governments, some sort of governing body, be it a clan chief who has total rule, or a group of elders. But also around the same time that was formed, religions were formed, that he goes on to say, and they've been fighting contentiously about who should have control over the morals and what is right and wrong within society ever since, And now we've got to our stage, 21st century, and that battle is still going on between, the politics, the governments, and the religious groups. They are still fighting about who controls the morals, who has the high ground, and where morals came from, and religion is basically sort of kidnapped the idea that you get your morals from religion rather than religion absconding it from basically an innate sense of right or wrong, which we all have within us, most of us, unless you're psychopathic or sociopathic or something like that, which is 1% is the population. So that battle is still going on between the political systems, the governments, and the religious entities. And what we're seeing now in a lot of places, and we've seen throughout history, is occasionally the religious group will totally take over the political, the government group, and what you get is a religious government, like in Iran, for instance. Or Afghanistan, but that's slightly changing because the Americans went in there and sort of changed that a bit. But before that, the Taliban were there; they were a religious government. And it also shows you the adverse side of that when the total opposite is done, where you get ideological governments like Pol Pot, Mao, communism in Russia, Stalin. And, well, not really Germany, because Germany was really a religious political system mixed. He was a Catholic, and he made a pact with the Catholic Church not to fucking invade the Vatican and stuff like that. So there was a pact there between the, but he wasn't religious himself, although he was Hitler. He wasn't totally religious. He was ideological nationalist, and he didn't kill the Jews because he was an atheist. He killed them because he was a nationalist and a theist, and hated the idea that the Jews were responsible for Germany losing the First World War. If you look up the history of the First World War before you read about the Second World War, you'll understand why he thought that, because of the way that this First World War ended, and what the Germans thought they had been cheated out of continuing the war and winning by the Jews giving up, going in the towel. But it's a wonderful clip. It describes all the things I've talked about in Boer, but it's the best sort of rational and reasonable explanation for why human beings evolved a sort of inbuilt reason for developing religion. Anyway, Swan's back.
Here to speak in support of the motion, Michael Shermer. He is the founding publisher of Skeptic Magazine, executive director of the Skeptic Society, a monthly columnist for Scientific American, and the author of The Believing Brain. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Shermer.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to start off with a thought experiment. Imagine you're a hominid on the plains of Africa 3.5 million years ago. You're a tiny little Australopithecine afarensis, little brain. Your name is Lucy. Thank you. A lot of people in the Midwest don't get that. Evolution? What? Not that Lucy, the other one. And you hear a rustle in the grass. Is it a dangerous predator, or is it just the wind? If you think that the rustle in the grass is a dangerous predator, and it turns out it's just the wind, you've made a type 1 error in cognition. A false positive. You thought the wind was connected to something and it wasn't. A was connected to B and it wasn't. So that's a false positive, but that's relatively harmless. But if you think that the rustle in the grass is just the wind and it turns out it's a dangerous predator, you're lunch. Congratulations, you've just been given a Darwin Award for taking yourself out of the gene pool early before reproducing. And we are the descendants of those who are most likely to make type 1 errors, false positives, versus type 2 errors, false negatives. That is to say, why can't you just stay in the grass and collect enough data to get the answer right? And the answer is that predators don't wait around for prey animals to collect more data. That's why they stalk and sneak up on their prey animals, so they can't get enough data. So we evolved the propensity to make snap decisions and make one kind of error more likely than another kind of error. And that kind of error, that false positive, that's superstition. That's magical thinking. That's assuming A is connected to B. It's a true pattern and it isn't, and you're wrong. That's the basis of finding false patterns like God's. Now, what's the difference between the wind and a dangerous predator? The wind is an inanimate force. A dangerous predator is an intentional agent. And his intention is to eat me, and that can't be good. So what we also do, in addition to finding these meaningful patterns, is infuse in them agency. That is, it's alive, it's real, it has intention, and its intention is not good, so I better assume it's real. And this is the basis of animism and spiritism and polytheism and monotheism and the belief in angels and aliens and demons and spirits and poltergeists and gods. Gods are invisible agents who run the world, who control things, who create these patterns, who are these patterns that we use to explain things. All cultures everywhere in the world have created God beliefs. Gods with these intentional that are intentional agents. So my question tonight is not, like in my book, why do so many people believe in God? Here's a theory, which I just outlined for you. But for tonight, I want to ask, what's more likely? That our opponents here happen to pick the right God and the right religion among all the about 10,000 different religions and about 1,000 different gods that humans have constructed socially, anthropologically, psychologically, in the last 10,000 years. 10,000 different religions, 1,000 different gods. Our opponents agree with us that 999 of those gods are false gods. They are atheists like we are atheists. What I'm asking you to do is just go one God further with us. So here's what happened. About 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, these small bands of hunter-gatherers began to coalesce into chiefdoms and states. As long as the numbers are small, informal means of behavior control and moral enforcement operate quite well. As soon as the numbers are too large for these informal means, shunning, making people feel guilty, gossiping about them, making them feel embarrassed for their bad behavior, as soon as the populations are big, there's too much opportunity for free riding and for cheating the system and taking advantage of it and getting away with it. So two institutions evolved. Government, to set up a set of rules and everybody gets a copy, and religion, in case you think you got away with it, you didn't, because there's an eye in the sky that knows all and sees all and keeps track of this. So this is the second part of how humans construct religions and gods, because we need it for moral enforcement. It just so happens, by contingency and chance, religion and government was the first on the scene. Now, what's happened in the last several centuries since the Enlightenment, in addition to the trajectory that Professor Krauss outlined for you, science displacing religion as the primary means of explaining how the world works, something else has also happened. We've slowly but ineluctably replaced religion as the primary source of our morals and came up with the clever idea that you actually have to have a reason why you have certain moral principles and we're going to write certain laws. You actually have to give evidence for why you think this is a good law or a bad law or a good moral principle or a bad moral principle. And that has been the trajectory of the Enlightenment since about 200 years ago. And so again, what's more likely, that one of them happens to be the one true religion and the one true God, and all those others that have been constructed are false gods, or that, as we can clearly see, anthropologically, socially, psychologically, and so on, this is what people do to get along. They construct religions, they construct moral systems, and so on. We now know that we can do this without gods. In fact, we do it quite well without gods. Northern European countries do just fine with much lower rates of religiosity than we have. It is possible to do that, and that is what we've been doing. Now, I want to finish with just one comment on the resurrection, since Ian brought that up. Let me just, leaving aside the scientific evidence for this, just think about what it is that is being said here. God, they are monotheists. They believe that there's just one God, and that Jesus is God manifest on earth, and he is your Savior, and you accept him for redeeming us for sins we never committed. Somebody else in the past committed them. So as I understand this, God sacrifices himself to save us from himself. If that sounds as incomprehensible to you as it does to me, I urge you to vote for our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.